Hello fellow YouTube subscribers and viewers, welcome to my channel. This is my first YouTube channel and this won't be a RC specific channel. Instead, I- I'll be talking about many of my interests and hobbies. My interests and hobbies are not limited to just RC. I like cooking, cars, motorbikes, so many other things other than RC. So I'm not gonna limit it to just one specific area. So I'll do my best to be consistent with my uploads and upload as much good quality content as I can on a regular basis. I don't know how often I could do it, because other than this channel, I do have other things that I take care of. So I'll do my very best. And to start off with my first YouTube video, uh, I'm gonna talk about a RC plane that I've got, which is a Black Horse Travel Air 40. This will be a review of this plane and the OS75AX engine plus a Spectrum DX6E radio. So I'll just show you the plane. This is it. It's a nice aircraft. It's light yet quite strong and sturdy, and it's well capable of taking maneuvers very well. And OS75AX engine is actually much bigger than what this plane was intended for. However, it does the job very well. Really pulls the plane hard. I've obviously reinforced the firewall because the structure is quite light and it's meant for a much smaller engine. So this is almost twice the engine it needs, twice the capacity, twice the size. And it does the job quite well, and really pulls the plane hard. I am careful with not pushing the plane's limits, because as I've mentioned, this engine is bigger than what the plane is intended for. So I'm not really pushing the plane's limits. You could tell when it's really reaching its point of limit, and once it reaches that point, you don't really want to push it any further. It's quite a nice looking plane. I will say the one thing I've noticed with the OS75AX engine, and this is something that I've noticed with I've read reviews with other OS engines, is that the rear bearings tend to fail. Rear bearings tend to have trouble. I did have this issue. My bearing went out, so I replaced it one time, and I replaced it a second time, and I've come to the conclusion that there's a design fault. There's definitely a design fault with this engine. I've opened up the engine twice, as I've mentioned. I've rebuilt it twice, and I came to the conclusion that the rear bearing just doesn't get enough lubrication. It just doesn't get enough oil. The manufacturer OS engines thought that the ports would bleed enough oil into towards the rear bearing. That was their plan, either for the ports to bleed enough oil, or for the fuel, or for the crankshaft. You know, there's like a passageway going all the way through the crankshaft. Yeah. What they were planning was for either the oil to bleed through the ports, or for the fuel that's on its way through the crankshaft towards the combustion chamber to pass along the oil towards the rear bearing. But the problem is, and what I've noticed, is that the crankshaft balancer is actually in the way of that happening. You know, it's spinning really fast, and I think it's just blocking off any oil that could get to the bearing. You know, that's what I think is happening, because the front bearing doesn't have any problems, you know, and most OS engine users have noticed that it's the rear bearing that has all the problems. And many people have said that what they think is the problem is mainly just the operating pressures of all the stress being stressed mainly on the rear bearing. But I don't think it's true, because after replacing the bearing twice, I've noticed the rear bearing wipe out, you know, on its first use, on its very first use. And I have the settings set on rich, not clean. I know how to tune an i2 engine. You know, I've been doing this for many years, and before the first run, the bearing sounds fine. The way you tell if a bearing is bad, and this goes back to my experience, you know, with working with cars, performance cars. You know, it's a very simple thing that most mechanics know, is that any bearing that exhibits any noise, you know, by hand, when spun by hand, is a bearing that is indicative of some form of failure or wear. You know, so when the bearing is almost silent before the first run, and then after its first run it makes a noise, then, you know, it indicates that there's a problem, there's an issue. So as I've said, before the first run it was completely silent, made no noise, had no problems with the bearing. I installed it correctly, and right after the first run I've noticed a noise when spinning the prop and spinner by hand. Now what I've noticed too is you know, some oil, after the engine is run and it's shut off, some oil bleeds back from the combustion chamber down to the bearing. And what happens is, right after you run the engine and you spin the prop by hand, you notice a noise because the bearing's dry, because, as I've said, it doesn't get enough lubrication. But as it sits for a while, you know, what I think is happening is the oil bleeds down, gets into the bearing, and then the noise, you know, is masked by the oil that's been bled down. But after you've run it, you know, freshly run it, and try to spin it by hand again, you hear that noise again. You know, so it's as I've said, this video is a review of both the plane and the engine, and I love the engine. It's a very, very powerful and very strong engine. I mean, it puts up a lot of power for its size. It is very reliable in its operation, you know. It doesn't give me any dead sticks, you know. The only time I did get dead sticks with this engine is when it was low on fuel and I pushed the nose down too hard or upwards too hard, you know, and it was just wasn't sucking enough fuel and it would turn off, you know. And but the reason was obvious. It was because it was low on fuel and at an unordinary angle. So naturally it would be exhausted of fuel, starved of fuel, I mean, sorry. So there was no surprise there, but other than that, it's a very, very strong performing engine, and it shoots this. And this isn't a, I wouldn't say it's a big plane, but it's neither a small plane. It's a 40 size plane, you know, and it shoots this plane up into the air, you know, effortlessly. Right after takeoff, I could point the nose upwards, and it will take the plane as far as your eye can see it, you know, up vertically, up until it's a dot and you can't see it, you know. And so it pulls really hard, and the only issue that I'm seeing with this engine is the rear bearing, and I'm not imagining this noise. I don't know if you could hear this noise right now. I'll try and spin it. You see? You hear it? That's the noise. So I'm not gonna rebuild it again. I'm just gonna ignore it. You know, if it runs and runs, you know, it's not worth my time anymore. And the noise, just because I haven't been using it for a while, you know, I think the oil just went away right now, and the bearing's dry, so you could hear the noise. When it's just been run and the oil bleeds down and covers the bearing, then the noise is masked away. So I don't really care about that right now. You know, I'm not gonna rebuild it 50 times when the problem is obvious. It's a lack of lubrication. The front bearing, you know, there's a passageway, you know, like a passageway for the fuel from the carb to go all the way and around the front bearing, you know, to lubricate it. So the front bearing has no issues, no problems at all. But the rear bearing is ignored. So when people say that it corrodes, it rusts, you know, it wears out, I think 99% of the problem is its lack of lubrication. There's no passageway. I mean, the front bearing gets all the attention, gets a nice passageway from the carb towards the bearing all around, and lubricates it quite well. The rear bearing doesn't get any of that. Well, and I don't blame the engineers, you know, I don't really blame them, because what they thought or they planned or they were anticipating was that the oil in the ports the oil in the combustion chamber would bleed through the ports down to the rear bearing, and the fuel that passes through the crankshaft on the way to the combustion chamber would be more than enough to lubricate the rear bearing, which is understandable. That's what they expected. That's what they planned for. But the reality is that the rear crankshaft balancer is, you know, because it spins so fast, you know, doing so many RPMs, you know, it effectively blocks off any oil splashing towards the rear bearing during operation. And most of the oil in the combustion chamber that they were anticipating would bleed off towards the rear bearing is blown off all over the plane. So there's not any oil, not much oil left to lubricate the rear bearing. And I mean, some people might go off and say, well, you might have, it might be tuned too lean, you know, not rich enough. And the way I tune my engines is I tune it to optimum setting, and the instructions call to just back the needle off slightly, you know, just slightly, to have it run just a bit rich, and that's where you need it to be. I actually go further and back it off even more, you know, and it's actually there. All my engines run a bit rich, a bit more than what the factory standards call for. So this engine actually runs rich. So, and you could see oil spitting out of the exhaust. So the needle settings aren't the problem. Like I've said, OS has a design flaw, and I think I could correct it, you know, by creating a passageway or some relief, you know, but right now it's not worth my time or effort. I've already been in this engine twice, you know. I have other things to take care of, you know. I've got this nice Cessna 182 with a DLE 20 engine, and I'm actually gonna recover this wing. I know this isn't a good job with the filler. That needs to be, I'm actually gonna resheet this, you know. So I have and I have this ultralight what's it called, Dumas, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's a very light aircraft. It's a scale replica. It's a scale of a what's it called, I forgot the name. Taylorcraft DC-12 or DC-18, I'm not sure. So I've got this flight test P40. So I've got plenty on my hands right now. So I'm not really keen on diving into this engine and experimenting with it, you know. If it still runs, you know, it runs fine. It's just the bearing is clearly worn. And I would expect, I mean, it's not a lot of noise, but any bearing noise indicates that there is a problem, you know. And I expect most of these OS engines, you know, after doing their first hunt, to have some rear bearing noise because, you know, because of its design flaw. And, you know, the experts out there are gonna argue and argue. Someone's gonna open up, you know, a point of argument, you know, and say that I'm doing it wrong maybe, or I'm wrong, you know. But it's pretty obvious that the rear, I mean, after I've opened up the engine just after I've flown it, and I could spot the problem right away. The front bearing, it was wet, you know, nicely covered in oil on the inside, and the rear bearing was dry. So there's your whole problem with these engines. And I'm not making this up, it's not a myth. You could look it up online, and it's a common problem. Well, now we're done with the engine, moving on to the plane further. It's a very light plane for its size and flies very well, and it's stable but could be thrown around, you know, do some nice maneuvers, especially with this engine. It's tough. It's got nice aluminum spar inside of here, you know, I like that. So I've done some nice maneuvers with it, and it takes them quite well. I didn't push it too far, as I feel like the stabilizers, both the vertical and horizontal stabilizer, are a bit flimsy. you know, because they're hollow on the inside, you know, so they tend to flap around a bit, you know, so I don't really want to push the plane, you know, because flutter or failure can happen, so I don't really want to push it too far. I might actually make some braces, you know, and then I could really push it as far as it would go, you know, in terms of maneuvers. Other than that, that's about it with the review of this plane and with the Spectrum DX6E transmitter. What do I think of this transmitter? It's actually an amazing transmitter for the price. I mean, I was just gonna turn it on, but I don't have. Just remember that I took out 2 batteries for my Xbox controller. Let me just try and get those batteries out to show you what it's like. Excuse me if I'm not talking enough during my first YouTube video. This is my first YouTube video, so I'm inexperienced. I'm doing my best, but I think I'll get the hang of it after several tries. You have to start somewhere. So this is actually my first radio that has a digital screen. I literally went from a DX5E, which is a 10-year-old radio, straight into this, so it's quite a jump. Has a lot of features and it's not too complex. See, it has my name right there, so I like it. It looks really nice. So I mean, it feels good, it looks nice, it's durable. I found it to be reliable. You know, Spectrum has had has been given a, I wouldn't say has been given, I think it's given itself a bad name when it first got into the business, and some people say it's a myth. Some people say that, you know, the users just didn't know how to operate their equipment, but I can speak from experience. I have lost an airplane because of their faulty equipment. That was a long time ago though. That was when they first came up with their 2.4 gigahertz equipment, and back then it wasn't even DSMX, it was DSM2, which was prone to failure and troubles, you know, signal losses. So, but I think they've come a long way. I was actually wary of getting another Spectrum radio, you know, but I bought it, you know, and I don't regret it. I actually really like this radio. I mean, knock on wood, so far it's been a good radio. I like this simple look, and I just all in all like it. Yeah, nothing more to say about this review. I would like to end this video, you know, by sending out a how could I say this, a message of positivity. I would like to end this video. I first of all, I hope that you liked the review. review of this Traveler Black Horse Traveler 40 plane with a review of the OS75AX engine and Spectrum DX6E radio. So I hope you like the review. As I've said, this is my first YouTube video, you know. Obviously I'm inexperienced, you know, and going to have some difficulties, but I am doing my best. And as I've said before, as I mentioned before, I know that over time, hopefully I'll pick it up and be more consistent. And as I mentioned, I'd like to spread a message of positivity during these difficult times. As we all know, the whole world is going through very challenging times with the whole COVID pandemic and crisis. You know, especially here in Australia with a lot of restrictions at the moment, people have really become really negative, and you can't really blame them. I mean, it's human nature to fall into negativity during hard times. It's just human nature. But what I say and what I'd like to say in this message of positivity towards everybody is that negativity will do you nothing. It will do you absolutely nothing. Just think of it this way, and you could disagree if you like. By the way, as I've said, you could disagree if you like. However, my opinion is that, you know, we're not limitless as we think of ourselves to be. I think, in my opinion, that the human mind is limited to how many thoughts it could process, you know, during each day. It's quite limited in its capacity. So when you're flooding it on a daily basis with negative thoughts non-stop, you know, what does it leave for positive thoughts? It doesn't leave much, you know. And anything positive in your life starts with a positive thought. So when your mind is constantly flooded, you know, with oh, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going with my life? What's happening in the world right now? Are we ever gonna get out of these restrictions? Are we ever gonna move forward, you know? And when this happens on a daily basis, not leaving any room for positive thoughts, you know? Positive thoughts that could lead to life-changing opportunities, you know. And you could say that, you know, I'm just being giving a cliche, you know, pep talk or whatever, you know. But this isn't something I got off a motivational video online. This isn't something that I've copied from someone somewhere. These are my thoughts that I think about, and this is the way I lead my life, you know, because everyone has done it at some point in their life, including me. I also have negative thoughts sometimes, but I understood that it could really hinder you, and it could really kill off any ambitions that you have, any goals, any potential, any life-changing opportunities. It could literally blow it right out of the water, and that's not something that you want, you know. So now it's easy for me to just tell you, you know, just stop thinking negative thoughts, you know. And you could tell me, well, it's just easy for you to say that, you know, but how do you do it, you know? I believe that it's like an exercise, just like going to the gym and building muscles. It's just that like a habit that you have to get into on a daily basis, you know. Instead of, you know, doing something negative or thinking about something negative, you know, keep your mind busy by doing something else. What helped me is my RC planes. So you could say it's just toys, you know. You're a grown man playing around with toys, kids' toys, you know. But for me, I love them. You know, for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, however long I fly, it takes all of my worries away, all of my negative thoughts away, and I'm up in the sky and flying and enjoying my time. You know, only so much capacity. So there's literally not, you're not giving yourself a chance when you're flooding it with negative thoughts. I hope you enjoyed my first video, and again, excuse me if I'm not doing enough, not doing the right, I'm not using the right techniques. I mean, you know, I am inexperienced. This is my first video, and I hope to improve with each and every upcoming video. And you could support this channel so that I could keep going, you know, and upload and do as much content as I can. And the way you could support it is not through donations. I'm not really into donations, you know. The way you could do it is by going to my eBay account store. Sorry, I will leave a link. Okay, my eBay account, you can look it up through eBay, is ADASE-86, and I will leave a link. And I've got some really cheap merchandise on my account. I mean, it's dirt cheap, and some of it's interesting, some of it's vintage, you know. And by buying some of this stuff, you know, you're encouraging and keeping this channel going, so that I could bring as much content and be as consistent as I can. This is some of my merchandise. Sorry, I wouldn't say merchandise, it's just some vintage vinyls. I am a music lover. I do love music. This is a Barry White vinyl, sorry. This is an Elton John vinyl. This is a John Denver vinyl. Neil Diamond vinyl. I have more coming, and I have books too, and they're all dirt cheap, you know. There isn't much margin of profit, you know, and whatever profit I make goes straight towards, you know, building up my YouTube channel. Yeah, I've got more stuff coming on the way too, so stay tuned. And the reason, you know, you might be thinking, why have I got vinyls on my, you know, in my store? Why am I selling vintage vinyls? Well, to be honest with you, and in spirit of sharing everything with my viewers, you know, as I've said, I am a music lover, and I do love vintage music and classic music, you know. And what I always believe in is that, you know, we do have our good moments, good points, high points in our life, and our low points. And during our high points in our life, you know, there's always a song linked to that high point, you know, to that moment in our life. And there's always some music, some artists, some songs that we always fall back on and remember. You know, that's why I love music. That's why I love all genres of music. You know, I don't just follow one genre of music. I love them all, you know, as long as it's good music. And I especially love vintage music. So be sure to visit my store, my eBay store, my account. I will leave a link. And if you can, then buy something. Like I said, it's all dirt cheap. And by doing so, you are supporting my channel. I'm gonna show you a video of some flights I've done with this plane. It's not a complete video, it's more like a compilation of several short videos, you know, takeoffs, landings, you know, so it's kind of yeah, like I've said, it's like a compilation of many combined videos, because when I first started flying this plane, I wasn't really planning on doing a YouTube channel or doing YouTube videos or whatever, you know. So I kind of just took short videos of it, you know, and so I've decided to mash up all these videos and make it into one video, and just put it into this same video that you're watching right now, so you could enjoy it, you know, hopefully with your breakfast, lunch, whatever, you know. So hope you enjoy the video. Please leave comments, subscribe, share, you know, and yeah, that's it. See you until next time.